Disney Animation's golden era was the first era of Disney animation. Not only would it go on to change what animation could be, but it also put Walt Disney and his studio years ahead of their time, taking place over the span of just a few short years in the late 1930s and early 1940s. The golden era holds up as groundbreaking, innovative movie making. So, let's explore it. After years of hard work and the success of Mickey Mouse in 1928, Walt Disney had finally found his mark on the Hollywood scene. But that wasn't enough for an ambitious man in his late 20s. He didn't settle on just having the most popular cartoon character. While most people who saw cartoons as nothing more than 5-minute jokes that played prior to films at local cinema, Walt saw the potential in animation as moving artwork. With the debut of his Silly Symphonies in 1929, he played with the idea of artwork, eventually adding color to go with his sound cartoons. Mickey Mouse and Silly Symphonies were getting him Oscar nominations and recognition around the world. But he thought the medium could be pushed even further. Instead of creating short 5-minute jokes, Walt was going to make a full-length drama film made entirely through hand-drawn animation. Disney's golden era consists of his first 5 films, each of which pushed boundaries artistically in their own way, with the first being the catalyst to see if the experiment would even work. That was Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Beginning with the development in 1934, animating the 83-minute film took over 3 years. Hollywood and the larger media considered Snow White to be Disney's downfall. He had announced the film in 1934, but continued to have nothing to show for it but a larger and ever-increasing budget. Originally, he had estimated to make the film for $250,000, but it would end up costing $1.5 million. Comparatively, the average Mickey Mouse cartoon cost around $25,000 to make, and what many consider the greatest film of all time, 1941's Citizen Kane, cost $840,000. The overly inflated budget came at the cost of coloring the animation cells, animating humans to have realistic flowing movements, changing the story to have some gags, rewrites to keep the story moving forward, and making sure the background and character artwork felt artistic and charming. Despite being ridiculed for spending as much as he did on such a risky film, Walt Disney and his staff were dedicated to the project, and it would eventually pay off. The release of the film in December of 1937 saw the film get rave reviews, and by the end of its original theatrical run in 1939, it had grossed over $6.5 million, the highest grossing film to that date. Disney knocked it out of the park with Snow White, and now he needed to follow it up with something that pushed the envelope even further. Pinocchio was put into production in 1938. With a budget that went above and beyond Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, eventually costing the company nearly $2.3 million. The Disney animation team took what they learned on Snow White and applied the colors, sound, and realistic movements to their second film. Wanting to top Snow White, they pushed themselves to add in new effects, making smoke, moving objects, and water feel realistic. For example, the scenes taking place in the water are drawn with lots of details on the up-close waves, but not as many in the background, giving a natural atmospheric effect. A technique often used by many skilled artists to mimic the way the human eye sees and focuses in real life. Similar effects were created with the studio's new multiplane camera, giving background, foreground, and character artists the ability to combine their efforts with one snap of the camera. The multiplane camera not only gave a 3D effect, but could also give the feel of the camera panning across the screen just like a major live-action movie could. Despite all of the hard work and innovation with animation, Disney's second full-length animation film, Pinocchio, wasn't the crowd-pleasing encore that Disney wanted it to be. The film is beautiful and artistically wonderful, but it wasn't as funny as his Mickey Mouse cartoons, and it wasn't as groundbreaking as Snow White was. Pinocchio only managed to gross over $1 million at the box office, and it would take years before eventually making its money back. While Pinocchio was in production, another venture in groundbreaking animation was also in the works. Walt wanted to create an orchestrated musical experience with visual animations that didn't have boundaries. After meeting composer Leopold Stokowski in 1937, they planned to work on a Mickey Mouse short, which would eventually end up becoming Sorcerer Mickey. But the short's budget quickly rose, and Walt's brother Roy insisted on minimizing the production. Walt instead opted to maximize it by not just doing the short, but a series of shorts that would create a full-length feature film. Fantasia would eventually be a traveling music production. Walt and a small crew invested $200,000 in a new sound system called Fantasound. Think of Fantasound as the first surround sound system, something we all know when we go to the theaters today. Each theater that Fantasia traveled to was updated with $85,000 in upgrades. Over 1,000 artists worked on Fantasia and its different elements, with the picture not having a singular narrative, but instead letting the music drive the film forward, adding visuals that felt natural to the musical piece. Walt would make over $1 million in the first couple of cities it played in, but the installation for Fantasound and the high production costs of $2.2 million eventually lost the company more money than Pinocchio did. Walt Disney needed revenue to keep his company afloat. He'd struck gold once, but had spent too much money on a new production studio and 2 features that were artistic but not what the public wanted from the Disney name. Dumbo would be Disney Animation's 4th full-length animated film. With a $950,000 budget, it would be under half the cost of Pinocchio or Fantasia, and would also be Disney's shortest animated feature, clocking in at 64 minutes. Walt asked his animators to keep the costs down and keep things simple. Character designs, backgrounds, and the story were simpler, with the animation feeling more cartoonish than any of the previous films of that era. The simplicity paid off as well, allowing for the film to be started and finished within the same year in 1941. And the film would gross $1.6 million, with critics praising the film as charming, endearing, and above all else, the best cartoon to come out from Disney yet. While Dumbo was a major success partially due to its simplicity and cost-cutting, another film was in production that would continue the soaring costs of Disney's previous films, eventually costing the company $1.7 million. Bambi would be the last film of Disney's golden era, but would fall short of the comeback Dumbo tried to recreate. Like Pinocchio, Bambi is a beautifully artsy film. The background paintings feeling impressionistic, and the characters of the forest studied to perfection feel lifelike in their movements and actions. Where Dumbo felt cartoonish, Bambi felt like an artistic masterpiece. Its take on man being the villain, the loss of Bambi's mother, and the fire that engulfs the forest all live on in infamy. But the entire film failed with critics, as it was nearly the exact opposite of Dumbo. The charm and endearing features of Dumbo are lost with Bambi's less fantastical and quite dramatic story of forest creatures.
Come, my son.
Today we look back at Disney's golden era fondly. However, the innovative, risk-taking animation team at Disney had failed to create something spectacular outside of Snow White's groundbreaking achievement. And with World War II causing problems with international film releases, and with many of the animators either going to war or going on strike, it would be a long time until Disney would have another critical and financial blockbuster on his hands. But the war would bring another chance for his team to innovate and experiment even further, eventually leading to the perfect mixture of artistry, comedy, drama, and Disney magic. Tell us in the comments below what your favorite film from the golden era is, and if you haven't already, check out the previous Disney Animation Eras video, which gives an overview of all the films Disney has put out to date. And subscribe to this channel, because in the next Disney Animations Era video, we cover the wartime era, which takes place from 1943 to 1949. And if you need even more animation history in your life, we here at Network 1901 also have a Pixar Animation Eras Explained video. Thank you for watching, and hurry back!